I've been amazed with how generous people are that are basically strangers, with their expertise and their time in helping me navigate my career.
I'm Phoebe Foy from Quantopian. Quantopian helps people around the world solve today's hardest investment challenges. Today, on another episode of Women in FinTech, I'm here with Amy Nutt, who's the Director of Product Marketing at OReilly Media. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't we just start off, with you giving us a little bit more detail on what you do at OReilly.
Sure. So as you said, I'm the Director of Product Marketing, and product marketing is one of those roles that can look a little different depending on where you are, probably like a lot of different roles. And what we really are, we're a strategic marketing group. So we think a lot about who's our target audience. We do research to help understand that. And then we think, what kind of offers would encourage them to become our customers? And so we work on offer development, positioning, messaging, and then really working closely with our sales teams to make sure that they have what they need to tell the story to our prospects. And then working with our product team to make sure that they have insights on the market that will help with their product roadmap development process. So a typical day, we're working across the entire organization. Oftentimes, product marketers spend more time with other folks across the org than even on their own team, because our work's really cross-functional, and so we get to get our hands in a lot of different stuff.
That's great. And can you tell us a little bit more about some of the products that are being sold?
Sure. So OReilly is a software company. We also have books and conferences, and we serve a lot of different audiences. So for the work that my team is doing, we're focusing on our online learning platform, and we serve individual professionals as well as the enterprise and academic and government institutions. And what our product is a collection of online learning resources that allow professionals at any stage in their career to access the content they need to build skills, solve problems, and advance their careers or organizations.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the positions you held prior to this position at OReilly?
Sure. So before joining OReilly, I worked at Constant Contact, and they're an email marketing and small business online marketing company. And while I was there, I held a couple different roles. I started out in the website team and worked on the creative side of things, and then moved over to product marketing. So that was a great experience to work for a growing company that was a bit bigger than OReilly. And sort of seeing as we kind of grew our business there. And then I joined OReilly back in November of this year, and what really excited me about the opportunity was the ability to build a team. And so I was the first product marketing hire.
Wow.
Since then, we've been adding to our team, and it's been really exciting to introduce it to a new organization. And to kind of see the team grow and have an impact on the business.
That's great. So what's it like to create a team, like being the lead of it?
It's great. It's really fun. It's a lot of work. I think part of it is just really kind of understanding what the needs are of the organization before building out the team. So it was a really interesting process just to talk to people who had never had this sort of functional role before, and try to understand what the needs were, and where we could sort of, stand up different people to help, that stuff come together. And so it's a process.
Very cool. And now in your current role, being like the leader of a team and building a team, what have you learned from being a part of other teams that you're implementing now that you're building your own?
That's a great question, and it's something that I'm reflecting on in real time, day in and day out as we're building the team. I think one thing is just really basically thinking about different org structures that I've seen in the past and what works well and what doesn't, and what types of roles or personalities or people could come together to make a good team. I think one thing that's been really helpful is sort of taking a good assessment of what are my strengths and weaknesses, and how can I complement people on the team, and who can complement my skill set, and how do we really build a lot of expertise across the board, and get the right kind of mix of people and personalities to do the job.
Interesting. It must be hard to take a step back and evaluate yourself like that.
I mean, it's a work in progress. I'm not, I think finding the time for reflection is difficult in anyone's, day to day. But I think it's something that I'm always trying to get better at.
So what did you major in college, and how did you choose that major?
Great question. So I was an English major, which means that I can do everything and nothing because you build a pretty broad skill set, and it doesn't necessarily have a really direct like correlation with something you do in the professional world unless you're a teacher. That's kind of it. So I would love to say that I strategically chose it and thinking about my future career, but I chose it because I like to read books and I like writing about them.
That works.
And so and so what I found though, what was really useful about having an English major and approaching my career is that you do a ton of writing. So I really built that skill set in writing, and that's been useful to every job I've had.
Definitely.
And then you also you read enough books and it's really just reading and learning about people. And so I think that to me is really fascinating to just understand characters and story. And while it's completely unscientific, it does have a lot of common threads with the type of marketing that I do today, especially when it comes to storytelling, because a lot of what we do is telling the story to our prospects and customers about the offerings that we have.
So how did you pick marketing and get your first position in marketing?
Yeah, again, I'd love to say that I had this like grand vision for my career, but really, out of college, I was looking for a job, and I had a couple of them before I landed in a marketing role. And I worked in publishing early on in my career, and that was sort of a hybrid, kind of biz dev, sales, and marketing role. There was a lot of different aspects to it, and the marketing stuff was the stuff that I gravitated towards the most. And so then I started to actively seek out a marketing role. I ended up working for a small nonprofit for a while, and what was interesting about that kind of experience from a marketing perspective was that I got to do kind of every marketing role under the sun, because nonprofits often have huge goals. They are notoriously understaffed and they have small budgets, and so you get to do a lot of stuff. So that was really a great way, I think, to kind of dip my toe into marketing, and I really found it was a great fit, and there was so much to learn and explore within marketing, and so I've been happy to work in that field ever since. Yeah.
Did you make a conscious decision to move into the more software field, or did it just happen?
So I did make the conscious decision. So a couple years into my career, having that English major background, I felt like there was a lot about business that I still wanted to learn, and I chose to go back and get an MBA. So while I was getting my MBA, I thought a lot about what my next step would be, and I took more stock in my career and the types of companies I wanted to work for. And so I decided that I really wanted to get into software because I love change. I love like a really steep learning curve and having to constantly like learn and understand new things. The product is never done in software, so there's always like something new coming. And so I really wanted to be in an environment where that would be kind of a part of how like business as usual worked. And so for me, that was software. And then I also felt that by joining an industry that was poised for a lot of growth and rapidly growing, that would make for great opportunities in the longer term. And one thing that I didn't fully appreciate at the time, but I appreciate more now, is sort of the idea that the job I have a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now might not even exist yet, because as companies rapidly grow, they have different needs for the kinds of teams that they need to kind of help them reach their next stage, and so that I find really exciting too.
Very interesting. And working in more of the software side of things, I'm sure you see fewer women than men. Has that ever had an effect on you, or have you ever seen or faced any female discrimination?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So my short answer is, personally, I haven't experienced anything that's like super concrete or specific that I would point to say, yes, this happened, and I felt that. One thing that I've actually looked for in some of the companies I've joined has been, are there women on the executive team? Are there women in more senior roles? And I've been fortunate to find 2 companies within the software industry that had that or have that. And so that doesn't mean that discrimination doesn't exist or that everything's solved. Great, we have some female executives, but I think it does help promote a culture where it takes away a barrier for women in kind of advancing their careers.
In terms of like that type of discrimination, have you seen any like general discrimination towards women that you can speak to?
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily call this discrimination per se, but I think in my experience, being a woman is part of your identity, and you might get treated a little bit differently because of it. And one thing that I've experienced is feedback. I love feedback, and it's great to get feedback on how you're doing and to help continuously improve and all that good stuff. So I've received feedback, from people saying either I needed to speak up more and kind of, assert my voice more in a conversation, or I was too aggressive and came on too strong. And, I'm the same person in both those situations, and I'm not like, crazy erratic or anything. And so I've just found that a lot of times when people give feedback to women, and this is super anecdotal, but it does tend to fall into maybe one of those camps, either like, speak up more or you're too aggressive. I think part of that could be caused by not having as many women, in the field in a company, in the tech industry, as an example, right? So if you have more women, you have more opportunity for varied perceptions of how women are interacting and behaving and performing, and it kind of opens things up a little bit more to act differently in those environments. So, that's probably the thing I can probably point to most clearly as being treated a little bit differently by being a woman. Yeah,
that's fair. Aside from, anything personal that you've seen, do you think overall the industry is getting better for women?
Yeah, I sure hope so. It's, there are a lot of challenges facing women in any industry, in any role, and more intelligent folks than I can speak to all those different things. But I would say, one thing I find, so two things I'll point to that I think are really encouraging for women. One is more flexible work schedules and leaves for childcare, maternity, that sort of thing. That's not something that just impacts women, it impacts men too, but I think it definitely makes working more sustainable for women. And then there's also, I think, just the fact that, we're having a conversation about women in tech right now, and the fact that, I'm having more conversations with people in my network about this type of stuff, and just being able to share experiences, acknowledge that it is different being a woman in the tech field, or probably in any corporate environment today, and that's a starting point.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this can be, in school or the workplace. Can you tell us about any mentors that have helped you in your career, or in school, like I said?
Sure.
That's helped you?
Sure. So I can think of a couple specific examples, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some. So when I worked in publishing, I had a really fantastic boss and mentor who was a team lead. She was extremely competent, but also had a great sense of humor. She was really direct, but also showed a lot of great empathy and respect for everyone she worked with. And so she modeled the way in a lot of those kind of characteristics I'd love to emulate in my own career. And then she was exceptionally good at helping me find, and this was early in my career, kind of opportunities for growth beyond the role I had at the time. So I've really appreciated that. Yeah. And I think, at this stage in my career too, so I have a 2-year-old, or almost 2-year-old at home. And so I tend to sort of seek out peers who are in sort of a similar stage of life. So a lot of, working mothers who I really respect. I can see them excelling in their careers, and I'm very curious to learn, like, what happens when they go home, And so I have a couple of friends and peers who are really accomplished product marketers who I've used, I kind of view also as mentors, and kind of understanding how they make things work for them. So
that's really great.
Yeah.
And speaking of mentors, if you were to give advice to someone high school or college level pursuing a similar career as yourself, what would you say to them?
Oh gosh, well, I love giving unsolicited advice, so I'd probably say a lot of things to them.
Perfect.
But I guess the first thing I'd say would be to network. And networking does not have to be some like sleazy, empty thing. Really it's just about learning what roles are out there, what companies are like, asking a lot of questions, and then having people ask questions of you that help you frame your story and how you want to think about your career and your goals. Yeah. I've been amazed with how generous people are that are basically strangers, with their expertise and their time in helping me navigate my career. Wow. And so I think just ask and talk to as many people as you can. And it might not help you immediately. It might help you someday. It might help you realize what you don't want to do or where you don't want to work, but also can be really helpful in kind of figuring out what your next step would be. So.
Great. Is there any advice that you wish you had received when you were starting out in your career?
Yeah. So something that I picked up along the way, and this was not my idea. I heard this somewhere else. I can't remember where. And I think this would actually be something that's really applicable for young women in particular, is that leadership happens at all levels in an organization. So you don't have to be formally in charge of a team to be a leader. And I think especially if you're in a situation where there are fewer women in roles of relative power, this is sort of something that you can take upon yourself to build for your own career. And leadership doesn't have to be this huge, big initiative. I mean, it can be a big cross-functional initiative, but it can be as simple as, getting up, being the person who gets up and goes to the whiteboard in a meeting and helps steer the conversation. And if you work in a tech company, there are literally whiteboards surrounding you at all times. The walls, you can write on the walls if you have to. But I think, just really stepping up and trying to find those leadership opportunities, however small, at any stage of your career. And then if you're seeing something in your organization that you think is missing or has to be done and no one's doing it and you think there's a great need for it, jump up and do it. I think that's something that you can sort of take some agency over in your own career, and
that's really great.
It's really useful. Yeah.
And probably finally, for you personally, where do you see your career going and developing?
Gosh.
I know it's tough. You already have a really great position.
Yeah. So when I think about the future of my career, I hope, I know I'll be working for a really long time, so I'll have plenty of time to explore a lot of different things, I'm sure. So what's important to me is that I'm continuing to learn, I'm continuing to build new skills. I'm really excited about, leading, building, and growing teams and organizations that can have a big impact. And I also care about working for companies that are generally doing something good in the world, right? So their impact in the world is good. So, I hope to continue building a career along those lines.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Amy.
No problem. Thanks for having me.